you're a
Mm.
good girl, you're a bad girl, then suddenly creates this I'm a good girl or I'm a bad girl or, I'm bad with money. Maybe there was an event that happened where you may have lost some money.
Financial Superwomen brings you all things money and finance. Creating financial independence can often be scary or confusing. Here, money management, wealth creation, and financial security is simplified to help you build a solid financial foundation. Plus, with Broken to Brilliant, Financial Superwomen provide free financial workshops for female family violence survivors. In the coming years, workshops to create financial supermen will also be realized. Financial Superwomen, giving you confidence to build a sustainable financial future.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Superwomen radio show. It's a radio show and podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we have the lovely Suzanne Alexander from Mindful Finance. And we're continuing our discussion on having the right money mindset. And we're going to delve into habits today. Is that correct? Have I got my show notes right?
Yeah, you do. You're spot on. Thanks, Damien. So today is a continuation of our last conversation. And this is really just taking this to the next level. So the last time we spoke more around the mindset and the psychology of why we behave the way that we do around finances. So what are some steps that we can actually start putting in place to look at more of the practical side as well? And there's always an emotional element as well as a practical side to managing money. And so we thought we'd explore the habits, and also I'll be going into a little bit around money story type so that you can become more familiar around some habits and behaviors that you might not have been aware of that were actually providing challenges around your relationship with money. So first up,
Before if you
sure.
go with that, because I think we don't really understand how much habits really play into our life. And I'll use this analogy is when you think about the toothpaste that you buy, more often than not, you don't even think about it. You're certainly not in the supermarket reading through each new toothpaste and working out where it is. You just buy the same one, and if you're like me, it's the same toothpaste that my parents bought and my grandparents bought. So we really don't understand. I don't think we fully appreciate how much these habits that we have affect our life, and in particular, our money mindset. Is that fair to say, Susan?
Yeah, you're spot on there, Damien, because a lot of these habits that we have and the behaviors that we, exhibit are really coming from that long-term memory. So it's like getting on a bike. Like, the toothpaste example is perfect because it's like getting on a bike and riding a bike, but not actually putting any thought process into the fact that, you've got one foot on one pedal and the other foot on another pedal, and then you've got hands on the handlebar. Or if you were that talented, you don't have hands on handlebar and you could ride without. But and that's what can happen. And so this is that subconscious or that longer term memory that tends to take over, and it just becomes automatic. And it's great when it's automatic if it's actually supporting you around money. The challenge we've got is so often we have these habits and behaviors which aren't
Mm.
actually supportive.
And that's
And
really important, I think, from that. Yeah, I love that analogy you've got with the bike, because the other thing you want to do is if you're going to jump on the bike, you want to make sure there's a seat there as well.
yeah.
That could be very
It's
painful.
like all the safety elements are there. You got your helmet on, you got the reflectors.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it's looking at so many different aspects to money, and we do
Mhm.
forget. And I think, especially in social media over the years, it's been more of the practical. Okay, you need to budget or you need to do this. And that's why
Mm.
the mindset has played such an important role of helping you to understand, well, I maybe know that I need to do a cash flow planner, but if I haven't got the mindset to support that, I'm not actually going to follow through.
Mm.
And it's the same principle, with regard to the changing of the toothpaste. You know that maybe another toothpaste brand might be a better option,
Mm.
but you're actually not taking that step to do that. And that's where the habit and the connection back into the mindset is so integral.
Cool. Thank you for that. I know I digressed there, but I thought that was a good background for the audience to have. So if we continue with the script now, where were you heading with the, the habits?
No worries, not at all. So with regard to the habit, I did briefly just touch on cash flow, and I want to actually, I'm going to take a step back. But we spoke about the mindset in the last conversation that we had. The next that, and I don't think I really touched on this as much, is really having a level of forgiveness and compassion for where you're at.
Yeah.
Because so often we don't appreciate that where we've been operating from is from an area where we've been operating with the tools that we had at that time.
Mm.
And so part of this conversation we're having is actually upgrading the tools that you will have access to. And what can quite often happen is when you bring that awareness to, oh, okay, this is what I've been doing and playing out, we can actually start telling ourselves, the thought process starts telling, oh, well, we're just bad with money. So that's the narrative will start playing out. In actual fact, it's not that you're bad with money. It's just that at that point in time, the tools and the situation that you were in, that was what you actually had to work with. And now you're going to start working with a different environment, a different set of tools. And that's why I just want to say, just have compassion and forgiveness for, that, where you've come from. And then let's start now exploring new habits and tools for you to start working with.
Is that
And
where it's really important from your identity perspective? Because whenever you say "I am,"
yeah,
that becomes you. Whereas it may be, I had a behavior is very different to do that. Is that something that you focus on as well?
absolutely. I love the I am statements. And I'm going to add another thing to that, which is the power of yet, which you may be familiar with by Carol Dweck, which is, so when you say I am, you're basically telling your mind, and your mind is going, oh, well, yep, that has to be true because I am. And it creates these neural pathways to follow through with that. So I am bad with money. Then you're just feeding this narrative that you're bad with money. And if you think about some of the commentary that might have been used when you were growing up, you're a good girl, you're a bad girl, then suddenly creates this I'm a good girl or I'm a bad girl, or, I'm bad with money. Maybe there was an event that happened where you may have lost some money. You were given the responsibility of maybe having $5 to go to the shops, and on the way to the shops, you lost that money. So I am bad with money. And so you keep telling yourself, and your brain goes, oh, well, then I must be bad with money. So we can reframe that, and we can do that in two ways. So we can start saying, I am learning to manage my money. So I'm not telling myself I'm bad. I'm just saying, well, I'm learning. So this is starting to put you on a pathway to correcting that frame that you've put into your mind. The other thing is, I am not great with my money yet. So we add yet to the end, because when we add yet to the end, it sort of negates what we've put at the start, and we add it comes in as more of a positive language. And you actually feel better by saying yet, because yet creates a capacity for opportunity, of learning, of growth. And if we've got that capacity to learn and grow, then we can upgrade our relationship and our ability to manage money.
Where does imposter syndrome fit? I'm having trouble with my language today. I've done that all morning. I'm making up complete new words. I'm going to write a dictionary, my own dictionary, Damo's dictionary.
It's cold here in Melbourne.
It could be. From that perspective, though, the imposter syndrome, because often we have that, we're brought up and we think a certain way, and then when we try and think a different way, it becomes, oh, that's not right for us. We're not being true to ourselves. And how much does that play into have that realization that who we think we are is just a repeated set of thoughts, which is again a habit, which is what we're talking about, and recognizing that, hey, this might feel uncomfortable now. I might feel like I'm not being myself, but that's because I'm evolving into something different. Is that, where does that play into this habits and imposter syndrome linked to that?
Yeah, you know, I just had this beautiful image of a caterpillar evolving into a butterfly.
Yeah.
Because, you know, what happens is that when we step into this new identity of someone who's upgrading how we want to live our lives and how we want to manage money and use money as a tool, then there is always going to be a level of discomfort because it's not the norm. You know,
Yeah.
more often than not for people, it's not the norm. And if we think of that, so you know, I can't give you verbatim what imposter syndrome means, but usually imposter syndrome, my understanding of that is that you're taking on another identity, but
Mm.
not for a good reason. So it's the word imposter syndrome is actually false in itself because you're not taking on this new identity of becoming financially literate to
Mm.
harm others, you're actually doing it to empower yourself.
Mm.
So I think first of all, we need to almost remove the imposter syndrome and just, yeah, like you said, look at it as I'm creating a new identity and there is going to be a discomfort coming there. And I'm not an expert. I mean,
Mm.
I hope that, I mean, yes, you know, you can be an expert to an extent, but there's always more to learn. So you're
Mm.
never gonna know everything.
And I think that's where what you're saying is really relevant to remember that, especially to do with beliefs and longer definitions like imposter syndrome, which is really two words put together, which doesn't, as you say, it doesn't, I think you're right. To look up that meaning, it'd be difficult to find a consistent version. And so I use another analogy is the word manipulate. Now,
Mm,
often we have a negative connotation to that word, but when you actually look it up in the dictionary, it means to handle with skill. Now,
mm,
whether that's for positive or negative intention, that's different. That's the same as a pencil. You can poke someone's eye out with a pencil, but
mm,
you can also, create wonderful poetry. So, and that's where I wonder from that perspective, again, having that when we look at those things where we've, as you said, I love that analogy of the caterpillar into the butterfly. Do we need to embrace that as, okay, this discomfort is because I'm actually growing?
mm.
Is
Yeah,
that,
absolutely. And I think that leads into I know we are so going off topic here,
well, it's all
but
related to the habits because a
it
habit
is.
is, it makes us feel comfortable. That's why we do habits.
Yeah, and there's a growth and fixed mindset, and you know, Dr. Carol Dweck, this is her research is all around this growth mindset. And the growth
Mm.
mindset is really focusing on this whole concept of learning
Mm.
and the pursuit of results. So being able to grow and learn and keep evolving. And that's why this, you know, image keeps coming up for me, which is you're actually keep evolving into a new being. And that in itself has a new skill set. You know, a caterpillar
Mm.
doesn't need to fly, but a butterfly does.
Yeah.
And so it all comes in, whereas the fixed mindset, just to give you the opposite side to that, is much more focused on someone who just believes, well, I was born with this brain and I can't upgrade it. So I'm bad with money. My mum and dad maybe were bad with money, or one of them, or siblings were bad with money. So that's who I am. And unfortunately, the fixed mindset is often associated with blaming others. I'm bad
Mm.
because of someone else.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. So if we can step more into the growth mindset, and that's that
Mm.
power of yet, it's that bringing in awareness, we have control to be able to make decisions and make choices in our lives to move forwards
Mm.
into this new identity.
Yeah, I love that. So let's move that forward again where you were going with the habits. I know we digressed there, but I think it
No
does
worries.
create a really important foundation for people because when we're creating a new habit, that is the challenge I think that we have to because they say it takes 21 to 28 days to create a new habit, mainly because people try once a day.
Yeah.
So, but which really, if you distill that down, it's 21 to 28 times. So if you
Mm.
do it 5 times a day, I'm not gonna do the maths on that in my head. I should have picked rounded
Go
numbers.
on.
But from that perspective, and this is where this is a whole nother topic, but we can delve into that in another episode of unconscious learning as well. Because when we actually let go, as you say, when we accept responsibility and say, okay, I need to change. If I change and then I'm in a relaxed, almost meditative state, I can speak to my unconscious because we act unconsciously. We don't do things consciously. There's just too many processes. But how do we move to that next step of the habits where you were heading before I took you
No,
on
no, that's
a whole,
okay.
whole tangent of down the rabbit warren? We were Alice in Wonderland. Here we come.
It is, and I love how you've given context to that, because the conscious brain is the short-term brain, and
Mm,
unconscious is the long-term brain. And
mm,
so the habit formation is actually bringing more conscious or mindful
mm,
awareness to what you're doing.
yeah.
So once we start exploring, we've brought awareness to what, how we think and how we operate with money. And we've gone into forgiveness for ourselves and forgiveness to others. The next thing is the cash flow side. We need to
Mm,
know what's the level of money coming in and what's the
mm,
level of money coming out. Because if we don't, then there's always a level of anxiety of, am I going to have enough? Am I going to have enough
mm,
to meet? Or am I've got so much debt that there's this, it's almost like a massive weight of burden that sits on
mm,
your shoulders, because you always feel that you've got debt following you, because you
mm,
don't have that capacity, or you may not have the capacity to pay that down. So the first thing is really getting clear around your cash flow. So I work with two principles. If you've got access to bank statements that have those expenses on them, the last 3 months, I recommend printing them off and
mm,
then highlighting them. So
yeah.
highlighting what, the water utilities is, and electrical and gas, and, your phone, and those fixed regular expenses, which I call those not lifestyle, sorry, they're everyday needs. They're the everyday expenses. What are those expenses that you need to be paying when you open the door? So
Mhm,
you walk in and you're paying for electricity, maybe gas, you're paying for water, you're paying for heating. So it's sort of, and then you've got your phone, so whether it's a mobile or landline, maybe you've got internet. So
mm,
all of those things are those regular expenses. And it's really starting to get an idea of how much are you spending on a monthly basis. I say 3 months because quite often there'll be certain providers that might charge quarterly. So
mm,
water bills might come in quarterly. And so you're capturing that 3 month gap. It's also being mindful of any half yearly or annual expenses that might come through. So car registration, any insurance policies that might come through. So
mhm,
capturing those. So if you aren't in a position that you've got access to that, I do recommend that you start looking at tracking your expenses for the next 3 months in advance. So that
mm,
you're starting to get an idea of, well, what am I paying money out towards? And then
mm,
that'll give you an idea that once you've got the quarterly or those 3 months, you can then multiply that by 4, and that'll give you an annual overview.
mm,
So we then can, then break that down into what the monthly is by dividing the annual by 12, and that'll roughly tell you how much on a monthly basis you need to be
mm.
allocating for expenses.
Yeah. And how, I mean, from that perspective, when we're looking at the mindset side of things,
Mm,
we get into that mindset of going, okay, I need um, to actually make sure that I have this money, because especially when you're dealing with quarterly, and if you're
yeah,
paid weekly, there's a certain amount that you need to be putting away each week to make sure that you've got the money for that. And one way I've seen people do is they'll work out what you're saying and go, okay, well, this is what I need to save weekly. They'll
mm,
have a separate savings account. As soon as they do it automatically. That amount goes in there, and
yeah.
that's where they pay their bills from. But how do we create that mindset that we actually do that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things is really starting to appreciate what those utilities provide to you. So
Uh,
quite often people will say, "Oh, I've got to pay so much for electricity or gas or water." But I
mm,
want you to think about the benefit it provides you.
yeah.
So we had, 3 degrees this morning in Melbourne.
And the
Sun's
fire
coming out
going
now, but 2 degrees, it
it's
was
still
freezing.
going very strongly right near me. It's
Yeah,
it's cold.
and so it's really appreciating, what does that really give you? So you've got fresh water to be able to drink. You've got
Mm,
fresh water to be able to shower and bathe in. You've got water
mm,
to be able to wash your clothes so that you can, walk around with nice, smelling clothing and bedding and so forth.
mhm,
What does heating can give you, it gives you that comfort. If you're paying rent or a mortgage, what security does that give you? It's a home that, you can walk in, and it's almost like your cave that you can walk in. So when we can start bringing, and another way to look at this is understanding what you value in life. So you can either identify that sometimes, unfortunately, through your banking, and might show you things that you don't value, and that's a great way to realign how you're spending. But start thinking about what you value in life. So do you value friendship or
Mm,
family, and maybe connection, so being with people, and that will also help to give you more of an, I guess, an attachment to spending that money. Because if your focus or one of your values is family or
mm,
health, then having a safe home environment for that family becomes really important. And
mm,
so that then builds an emotional connection. So we're looking for an emotional connection to what you're spending on, because
mhm.
then that will drive you to actually put that money towards that particular service or thing.
Yeah, I love that. And so from that perspective, where do we go to next from that money mindset and creating the habit? So you've got the habit of saving the amount, and there's a number of different ways to do that. And
Mm.
bank account one was one. I learned that from my grandma, who used to put, you had the little jars on the shelf
Mm.
where she put X amount for the bread, and all that went in there. And it's the same principle applies. So we've got, is it creating that habit of saving? Is that what we need to do? Is have that mindset of our first focus is saving as opposed to, what can I buy next?
Yeah, yes and no. So, and I say this because by understanding what, first of all, we need to identify, is there a difference between what we're bringing in and
Mm,
what we're spending? So that's
mhm,
the big thing. So are we spending more than we earn? And
mm,
if we are, then it might be a great opportunity to review your expenses. And if there's not a lot within there that you can change,
mhm,
then it does actually put you in a position that you then need to look at creating more income.
mm,
So is there another opportunity to take on, or rent out particular things? So people rent out their cars or rent out a room within their home,
mhm,
or is it another job that you need to take on? So that's the first thing to identify, if you're spending more than you earn. And if you're not, maybe you actually have savings capacity, which is you're actually spending less than you earn. And if you've got savings capacity, the focus will be making sure that within your allocation, your cash flow, you've allocated money for yourself. So
mhm,
there's got to be a fun component within your budget. And the
mm.
reason I say that is that I've seen so many clients over the years who have stripped everything out from a fun aspect, and they always go and break, the savings,
Go on
but
the
go and
binge.
spend
It's
all the
like
money.
I've done it. Because
Yeah.
and I mean, do we need to recognize too that component of willpower, it is exhausting after a while trying to
Mm.
rely on willpower. And so we need to have that aspect where it is fun. But from that mind shift as well, what you're talking about, I remember when I was doing that, I was going, looking, I've got to spend less than I earn, got to spend less than I earn. And I was thinking, this really sucks. This is not fun. And for whatever reason, I shifted and I said, I've got a slight shift, but I said, I've got to earn more than I spend. And all of a sudden, I saw all these different opportunities in front of me where I could earn more money and I could do all these extra things. Is that the kind of shift that we're really looking
Absolutely.
to make?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's reframing it into more of a positive language.
Mm,
So you're focusing, even the reframe that you've described then,
mm,
I need, well, even it, let's remove the need work. I need word. I want to earn more than I
mm,
spend,
yeah,
because need has a real, it's almost like a struggle energy to it. So I
yes,
want to earn more than
yeah,
I spend.
or I
So
do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if we start there, and then from that point of view, then we can then, if when you're doing your cash flow, as long as you bring in this joy or fun component,
Mm,
then you don't find that you're needing to dip into your savings unless there's an emergency. And again, we're going to talk about that as well as part of creating this habit, because at the end of the day, if you've got enough capacity to have fun,
mm,
then you're not looking externally to sort of go and blow everything, because what happens, and it's like giving a monkey, you know, 2 pieces of fruit and then taking one away.
Yeah.
It's never gonna happen. You're never gonna
No,
so
I've seen those, read that research. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So what we
I
wanna
don't like
do
it.
is we want to actually give ourselves enough money that, and it's all within reason, that we can have that joy. We can go out for coffees, or we can go
Mm,
out and, you know, have meals, especially if family and connection, what's going to support that connection. It doesn't always have to be a paid activity, but maybe it's going out and having a meal out once a month, or having coffees on a regular, you know, daily basis, or whatever that is for you. So it's making sure you factor that in, and then the savings
mm,
won't feel as if it's that need to energy. It's like, I want
yeah.
to save this because I've actually allowed my, you know, enough for fun and joy.
Is it the same as, because what I like to refer to is the Snow White or the Mary Poppins effect, and I know they didn't understand how dopamine worked when they created those movies, but if you're watching Snow White whilst her and the animals are cleaning the house, they're singing "Whistle While You Work." And
Mm,
Mary Poppins said, "In every job that can be done, there's an element of fun. Find the fun, and it's a game."
yeah.
Is that, I mean, and is that part of the mind shift that we can make in that money mindset of no, you know, it's not, I've forgotten the statement. It was not liking what you have, but what was it? Wanting what you have was the end of it. Not having what you, I can't remember how it went. I'll look that up and put it in the show notes. But
You're right.
that gratitude for what you have, and
Yeah.
recognizing that and being joyful because of what you have, and that creates that different mindset where you can actually enjoy, rather than, going, oh, I've got to go to the movies. You might read a book and enjoy it just as much.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's that whole reframe, because say cleaning a house, what do you get out of that? Get the
Mm.
benefit of sitting in a clean house, and it's fresh, and it smells nice. So it's the
Well,
same with your
I actually enjoy when I pull out the vacuum cleaner. I enjoy it. Just I don't know why. Maybe I'm sick.
you and I are weird.
Exactly. It's like, this is fun, and maybe I'm just singing "Whistle While You Work." I don't know, but it's
And that's the thing. It's the gratitude component. If we can
ah
bring gratitude into our
yeah.
daily living, and a great concept for that is, before you even get out of bed,
Mm,
it's 3 things, whether it's out loud or, you know, in your mind, what are you grateful for? And I always start, especially this morning, I was like, you know, the warm bedding, a roof over my house, you
I
know,
don't have to get up straight away because it's cold
yeah,
outside.
yep, heating. And if we can start that, we're actually changing this way of
Mm,
how we're thinking. And the more grateful we are,
yeah.
the more positive things start to come into our lives, more
So
opportunity.
true. Yeah. Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, no. So so the gratitude component comes in. So when you have that joy, and that, and knowing that you've allowed yourself, you know, within your cash flow planner, some joy and fun, again, that's another reason to be grateful for. I'm grateful because I get to go out for lunch with, you know, XY,
Mm,
you know, person this, you know, today. Or so it's really starting your, and that's why within the military, and you know, the Navy, they talk about this concept of making your bed first thing in
mm,
the morning, because it sets you up for a good day. Like, it's setting you up with a positive task, and it's a
mm,
small task. So the other thing too, when you do your cash flow planner, bring some fun to it. Put some
mm.
music on. You know, if you enjoy alcohol, have a glass of wine. Exactly. If you like chocolate, bring out a block of chocolate. You know,
Yeah.
I quite often, and one of the habits for me is, I will do a full check of my finances on a monthly basis. And, you
Mm.
know, I will have music on. I will quite often will have a drink of some sort, or I'll have chocolate, or whatever it is, but just turn it into something that's joyful, because
Chocolate
you
budgeting, I love it.
yeah. So you get to. And then the next concept around that, I mean, to support the cash flow too, you can have multiple bank accounts, as you alluded to before. It's like the, you know, the money jars or the money envelopes. Bank accounts can work in the same way. So you might have a bank account for day-to-day living costs. I talk
Mm,
about a buffer account, which the buffer account is more in case of an emergency. So you want to be building, we often talk about 3 to 6 months of living expenses,
mhm,
or those expenses you need to keep the house running. So if you weren't able to bring an income in for 3 months, at
Mm,
least having funds there to support you for that period. And then that allows you capacity if a hot water system breaks down or
mm,
damage to your car, you've got some emergency savings there. And it also gives you peace of mind
yeah.
that you've got money to fall on rather than thinking, I'm living pay to pay, which I know a lot of people are experiencing that at the moment, unfortunately. But if you have capacity to save, in that account, you might also put your longer term expenses, those
Mm.
annual expenses that you don't want in that day-to-day account because they could be eroded and they may not be there for when you actually need them at, quarterly or half yearly or annually. The
With
other
the
thing,
mindset for that having that buffer there, 'cause I remember reading about Bill Gates when he started Microsoft in the
mm,
very, very beginning. He was, thinking, "This is not gonna work." And he said, "What I wanna do is make sure that I've got enough money for the employees if it doesn't to last a year." So from the very beginning of that company, they managed their cash flow to keep that 1 year's salary, no matter how many employees there was, 1 year's salary in the bank, which became a phenomenal amount as the company grew to a big organization. But it also provided that security. How do we create that mindset to go, okay, that money there is that security, and it's not to dip into, oh, I need to go to the Bermuda or wherever we want to go for a holiday?
yeah. Look, there's a couple of ways to look at it from, and some people will still struggle from a mindset aspect having that.
Mm,
Usually that may come from a past trauma or an event where
mm,
having money is actually associated with I'm not worthy of having money. Maybe money was
mm,
taken from a money tin, and I think we might have used this example, but it keeps coming up when I speak to people, which is money was taken from my money tin or piggy bank when I was younger, and it wasn't returned. So this thought process of having money can be often attached with a level of I'm not worthy or low self worth,
mm.
or if I don't spend it, someone else will. A
Yeah.
great way to start building and changing how you're thinking is to start small. So maybe putting $10 away a week,
Mm,
building that up. You might find you get to $100 and then draw all of that out. That's okay.
mm,
Then you start again. You might
mm.
get to 500. So it's building that momentum and negating that old narrative that if you have money, someone will take it.
That's a habit, is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So it does lead to that habit that's formed from the thought process, and it becomes part of your behavior. So you, if you struggle or you're challenged around building this buffer account,
Mm,
again, attaching emotion as to why you have that account, because
mm,
maybe we're going to go back to the family one. I value family as my strongest value. Then
mm,
what would happen if you couldn't, someone broke an arm or someone, was
mm,
injured or the hot water service. If you couldn't provide for them, well, how emotionally would that come out for you?
mm,
And then going, well, on the other side, that if I had the money there, what
mm.
emotion would I attach to that? How good would I feel being able
Yeah.
to know that I could actually pay for those services immediately?
So we've got cash flow and then building up
Yep.
a safety buffer. What's
Yep.
the next money mindset that we want to build?
Yeah. So the next one is focusing on what are the goals that you're wanting to achieve.
Mhm,
So where do you want to go with your money? What's the next thing on your agenda? Are you saving for a holiday, or maybe you're actually renting and you want to get into a home? So
mm,
we want to start looking at the deposit. So it's starting to actually give that savings a purpose. So putting it away so that you're actually saving it for the future and
right.
having some goals in place to be able to support, because we know that if we don't actually give money a purpose, it just
Mm.
disappears. It's like a leaky bucket.
I like that analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the next one I would say, is focusing on, well, okay, now that you've worked out your cash flow, you've got some bank accounts to support that. So we've talked about the needs account or your living expenses. We've got a buffer account. We just talked about potentially an account for savings that you're
Mm,
putting aside to invest later, and
mm,
the fun account. So making sure that the money for your fund side is set aside separately. So when you do look at that money, you
mm,
intentionally look at that money and go, actually, I allocated that specifically for me to buy new clothes or go out for lunch or have coffees.
Mm,
So the goals is the next component. And then looking at making sure, or if you've got debt, being
mhm,
really conscious of getting that debt, especially if it's credit card debt or personal loan debt, reduced as soon as possible.
mm,
There's two ways of looking at debt management, which is there's what we call the avalanche effect,
mhm,
which is we're looking at the highest interest rate that is on a particular loan. So you might have multiple credit cards. You might be looking at the highest interest rate and then paying the credit card with the highest interest rate down. The
mhm,
other way you can look at that is what we call the snowball effect, which is looking at the smallest debt that you've got. If
mhm,
you're someone who likes quick wins, you might have, again, multiple credit cards. You might have a credit card with 500. You might have a credit card that's, maxed out to 10,000. You might look at focusing on a quick win of trying to pay down that $500 debt first and then
mm.
actually getting rid
Stop.
of
Yep.
that card.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that snowball effect is then you move on to the next one. So the payments you were making towards the 500 go towards the next card. And so getting that debt. So the quicker you can reduce your debt, the more capacity you have to save and put
Mhm.
it towards your long-term goals for the future.
It certainly makes a difference. I know from my experience where, yeah, getting rid of, there was a particular car lease that I had that was quite expensive. When that was gone, it was, it just completely changed the cash flow situation significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different forms of debt out there. And I know, we might have to save that for another
Our
episode.
whole debt session.
Yeah, a whole debt session.
We'll invite the government. So
Yeah, exactly. There's so much of that too. So it's just understanding what credit card or debt do you have and what's the interest rate that you're paying on that. Just being mindful because you're paying the government or you're paying the bank for
Mm,
borrowing that money.
yeah.
And the longer you borrow that money for, what happens is that bargain that you put on your credit card, suddenly you've basically paid full price, or in some cases double, depending on
Mm.
how long it takes for you to repay.
Yeah, very true. And
Yeah.
so where do we move to next? What's the next? We've got, we've covered those off. We've got
Yeah.
debt now sorted. Where do we take next? Do we move into, so investing? Is it because we're saving money? We've got our cash flow sorted. We're saving some money. We were addressing the debt situation. Is there a mindset around, investing and how we deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of people, the fear around investing is a fear of, I don't know.
Mm,
And so, again, your ability to invest is going to come down to a money narrative that you've been telling yourself of whether
mhm,
you feel that you're capable
mm,
to be able to invest. And a lot of that capacity to invest comes down to your education around investing. And
mm,
so it's building the education around investing. So
mhm,
again, what investment styles or options there are out there, and there's so many to go into.
mhm,
But your basics are the bank account. So you can invest money in a bank account for sort of more shorter term, so
mm,
that you're building savings for the longer term. But then it's looking at, well, what style of investment do you need to support your goals?
because then
And, no, you go.
no, what I was gonna suggest from or ask about from that perspective was when we're looking at that, because investing, I would imagine, is it a mindset around, I need to work for money, shifting to I have an option of, passive investing, which means that the money's working for me. Is that
Yeah.
that mindset shift?
Yeah, absolutely. So quite often, especially when you're employed, you can attach this association, I have to work hard for my money. It goes back to that I am
Mm,
statement we talked about, but, I have is pretty much the same. I have to work hard for my money.
yeah.
But we can flick that and we can talk about money working hard for me. And
Mm,
part of that is that by investing funds, your money will make money.
mm.
And that's the benefit of compound interest, which is
Eighth
when
wonder of
you,
the world by
yeah,
Einstein.
it is, absolutely. And that's where money, the money that you, or the interest or earnings you earn on your investment then earns more. And
Mm,
that's where we start to create, which is what you just spoke about, which is this passive income that comes in. So
mm,
when we look at investments, we look at, is the actual investment going to increase in value?
mhm,
Then the other side, so is it going to grow in value? And then what's the income potential that could come with that? So a basic principle might be a house. So from a house perspective, will the home grow in value?
mm,
Can I bring income or generate income from property? So
mm,
rent is a perfect
mm.
example. And so that passive income is you being able to generate income from that investment that you're putting your money into.
So to wrap all that up back into the habits aspect of that, because you mentioned
Mm.
before as well about saving. So you might save $500 as you said, and then you spend it, and then you do it again. Is this whole process, we're going to link that back into the habits of recognizing that yes, if you don't have that mindset, it's about shifting that mindset, and maybe we can do a whole session on how to shift that mindset more quickly.
Yeah.
But is it about just recognizing that when you're starting doing something new, changing a habit, if you're not used to changing habits, I love the term beginners suck. You're probably not going to be too good at it. You just need to try it again. Is that
Yeah.
the mindset
And
you need to have?
absolutely. And if you get an opportunity, we might be able to share it in the show notes as well. Sarah Blakely, who was the founder of Spanx in the
Mm,
USA, which if you're not familiar,
amazing story.
it's literally, those suck me in clothes that all the women wear under their dresses. That's what she brought. But when she was growing up, every day, her dad would say to her, "What have you failed at today?" And
Mm,
as soon as she said, "Oh, I stuffed up this or I did this," he's like, "Yes, that's fantastic." And the association was, if you're not failing, you're not progressing. And
mm,
you talked about manipulation as a word that quite often we will interpret as a negative word. And
yeah.
yet, failure, because we all failed when we were born. We failed to crawl. We failed to crawl, then we failed to walk, and then we failed when we started riding a bike, and then,
Mm,
even running, we failed really, as we started to evolve our running.
yeah.
Um, the same thing, at some point we actually attach this association to failure as being a negative thing.
Mm,
So it's again that growth mindset of attaching failure and going, you know what, failure is progress. So if I'm not sucking at something on a daily basis, I
yeah.
actually haven't made progress today.
And that sounds like from that perspective, when we're talking about this in winding up this show, is do expand on that philosophy of this failure in changing habits. Because we're talking about changing habits. If
Mm.
we're not going to succeed straight away, is that right? If we're going to put that in a nutshell, how would you put in a nutshell the the habit component of this, adjusting habits?
Yeah, look, the thing is you've got to take the first step. You've got to
Mm,
get started. And the reality is the longer you delay taking the first step, I talk about this, what's the opportunity cost?
mm,
Because for each day that you don't actually get started on, you've just lost out on a day of opportunity. An
mm,
opportunity to up level, an opportunity to create more, income, an opportunity to invest and create passive income, an opportunity that's going to get you closer to those longer term goals. So you're right. It's all about just getting started and embracing sucking at, at what you do, because and Mark Zuckerberg also talks about this. He goes, I wouldn't
Zuckerberg or Zuckerberg? Sorry.
well, he
Sorry.
talks about this concept. He goes, I wouldn't have created this empire today if I didn't actually get started and fail. He goes, and I'm still failing, which we clearly know.
Mm,
But,
yeah.
it's understanding and appreciating that by getting started, we actually start on that pathway to creating a new habit. Again, bringing into the mindset the forgiveness and then starting to create
Mm,
new habits. Because for a lot of people, we may not be aware that there are particular habits that are going to support you more than others.
mm. Is that a case too when we look at it, bringing back that analogy of compound interest?
Mm,
When we first start changing a habit, it is going to be challenging, it's going to be difficult, but the more we do it, the more we practice, the easier it's going to get. Is that?
yeah. Absolutely. You spoke about that before, which, To change a habit takes about 21 days, and to really embed it, it takes 66 days.
Mm.
It's 3 months. So we want to be able to get started, and then we want to still, build this consistency to take the habit formation a little further.
Mm.
Habit stacking, which I know it's spoken about in James Clear's Atomic Habits, but if we can stack a habit on top of something else, so maybe you've decided that once a week you're going to have takeaway. Well, once a
Mm.
week, maybe you could do a money date with the takeaway
Mm. Yeah.
and habit stack that. So you're attaching it to something that you're already doing. It's like when
Mm.
they say, when you're brushing your teeth,
Yeah.
Mel Brown will talk about high-fiving yourself in the mirror.
Yes.
Again, it's starting your day on a positive way, but,
Mm.
from a financial perspective, what can you habit stack that with something that you're already doing? So if you're checking your bank balances, and I would recommend doing that on a regular basis, like even weekly, because it's a great way to identify if there's been fraudulent activity.
Mm.
It gives you an awareness of, do you have enough money in the bank to be able to pay your upcoming bills? It's a great way to look in your fun account and identify, well, how much money have I got to spend this weekend, or, go out tonight, or whatever it is. So yeah, habit stacking that, and that might be done at a dinner time or whatever it is, but it's just bringing in another something you're doing already, and then putting another habit on top of that.
I love that. Susan, it's been so wonderful chatting to you here on Financial Superwomen radio show and podcast. It's been amazing, great knowledge, and I look forward to our next next encounter. I'm going to call it, because it makes it sound more exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being part of the Financial Superwomen team and helping create financial security for people around the world. Financial security helps build overall security for women and men, and strong foundations open the door to a peaceful